what we need to do as a workforce is ask ourselves, what can we expect from the tools? What can we ask for from the tools that make it easier to decrease the difference in the quality and creativity of the work that is done on the days when people are physically together versus on the days when someone is home or everyone is home?
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Tech Your Business podcasts. Today on the Tech Your Business podcast, we have a guest, and on this guest episode, we'll be talking collaboration, we'll be talking remote work, we'll be talking things like that, as well as Microsoft Teams. Our guest today is Adam Riggs. Adam Riggs is the CEO and founder of Frameable, which is a SaaS, that's software as a service company, which builds products and features that improve the digital collaboration experience. So Adam has had a lot of experience before building Frameable and is going to share a bit of that with us on this episode. So welcome to the show, Adam.
Thank you, Peter. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on. So tell us a bit about yourself and what you do.
Of course. Well, I'll start with Frameable and work my way backwards for a few years. So Frameable makes upgrades for Microsoft Teams. The out-of-the-box experience that you get when you buy Microsoft Teams is a great starting point, but there are some opportunities to improve it for certain types of collaboration, certain types of work where the out-of-the-box experience is not quite as good as it can be. So we build a suite of upgrades or apps that you can install inside Microsoft Teams. You can install one or all of them. We have a family of about 7 of them right now, and each one of these changes Microsoft Teams in a slightly different way. And I'll just give one example. In Microsoft Teams, you can only share one screen at a time when you're doing a screen share. You know, screen sharing is a really important part of remote collaboration. And Microsoft out of the box has a one screen limit, one screen at a time. So we have built an app that overcomes that limitation, that raises the number of simultaneous screen shares from just one out of the box all the way up to, I think, 10 or 15 at a time.
Wow.
And so this is really an amazing improvement for certain kinds of work. So all of our apps do something similar in that they are focused on improving remote collaboration for companies that already are committed to Microsoft and already use Microsoft Teams for their video and their text chat. In my recent career, before Frameable, I have spent time building some mapping applications, like mind mapping applications. This is another really important part of the remote collaboration toolkit. So I have some experience there. I worked in government for a few years between 2013 and 2016 at the State Department and the U.S. Treasury Department. So that's about the last 10 years or so of my career.
Wow, that's really a really interesting story. So why did you choose Microsoft Teams as against other collaboration tools like Meet, Zoom, and the rest?
Yeah, great question. Well, we built a version of our we built a standalone version of our ideal collaboration experience first. Standalone meaning it didn't have an integration with Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Google. We had a small Slack integration for chat, but in terms of the video, we were just using the in-browser video technology, the video technology that's embedded into all modern browsers. So we didn't have an integration with a big video provider like WebEx or Zoom or
Hmm.
Teams. And what
Yeah.
we heard from our early customers and from our early potential customers was, what you are showing us here is a really remarkable sort of future state. It's like a vision of what remote work could be like. and we really like a lot of what we're seeing. However, the reality from an adoption perspective is that there isn't going to be any way for our company to adopt your software if, in order to adopt it, we need to try to get people to stop using WebEx or Teams or Zoom or Google Meet
Oh,
or whatever it was that they've already committed to. And so what we learned, really, what we already knew, but we learned again the hard way, is that um, for the cornerstones of digital infrastructure that that are so important for remote collaboration, the cornerstones being email, the calendar, text chat, and then video calls, including screen sharing. Those four things are considered such critical infrastructure for a company that once they have adopted one of those, a system that provides them one or several of those, it's basically impossible to get them to switch, because people are
hmm.
trained on how to use it, and they build their daily workflow around their understanding of how the software works. So no executive or leader wants to ask people to learn a whole new piece of software as it relates to those four pieces of infrastructure. So therefore,
Yeah.
we really had no choice, to be honest, Peter. We had no choice but to look at what was the most widely distributed, widely used software in those categories, and then try to make a decision about who we were going to integrate with first. And so we did that. We looked at WebEx, we looked at Zoom, we looked at Google, we looked at the Microsoft stack, and it was a pretty easy decision for us because Microsoft is the only company of all of those that provides all four of those pieces of digital infrastructure. So they provide Outlook. Outlook covers the calendar and email functions.
Yeah.
Most companies that use Microsoft will use Outlook, and they will use Outlook for calendar, and they will use Outlook for email. And then the Teams client, which is relatively new, only 5 or 6 years old, has quickly become the dominant provider of text chat and video calls, especially video calls. So obviously Slack is now owned by Salesforce, and they are also, the main player in text chat. But when it comes to video calls are not a priority for Slack. Um, and text chat outside of meetings, not a priority for Zoom. Zoom doesn't have an email client. Slack doesn't have an email client. So if you're using these other products, which can work very well and integrate very well, you are using at least two or three different brands to provide your
Hmm.
team with those four pieces of critical infrastructure. Whereas if you're paying for Microsoft Office, Office 365, you're using Excel, you're using Word, you're using PowerPoint, then you're probably using Outlook, and you're probably using Teams. So uh, it was a pretty easy decision for us just to survey the landscape of where these pieces of digital infrastructure come from, and then to recognize that Microsoft is a great place to start. So we will eventually build for Zoom, WebEx, Google, etc. But for now, we are entirely focused on Microsoft upgrades.
You mentioned that you have about seven different products that you build for Microsoft Teams, and you mentioned the one for the multi-screen share. So, can you talk about some of the other products you build and what's how they improve teamwork?
Sure. So right now, the multi-share product that I just described is kind of the easiest to understand, with no visuals at all. Everybody's been in a video
Hmm.
meeting. Everybody has experienced this limitation where you're working with people. You want to, well, let me say it this way. If you are presenting something to a group of people, one screen share is enough. But if you are in a mode where you are listening and also contributing and also collaborating and also taking notes, then this is a limitation that you've come across and it's easy to understand as I described it before. Um, Another example of an app that we offer inside of Microsoft Teams is a view of all of the chat activity, channel activity, and meeting activity all in one view. So for Teams users who are listening, they know that they will have to switch back and forth with a mouse click between their calendar, their chat, their channel activity, if they have any, and they'll have to switch back and forth with a mouse click every time they want to take an action or survey the latest activity. Then, furthermore, within chat, one of the interesting things about Microsoft's out of the box chat experience is that one on one chats and group chats and chats that are the result of meetings that you were in are all mixed up together. So we have some views that separate these into a. We separate them. We separate the groupings into distinct visual areas, but we also bring them all together into a single view, which just makes it a lot easier to survey the activity.
Looking at your professional background, you said you worked with the government between 2013 to 2016, and you've worked with other companies in different fields. Gathering this experience from before, how has it influenced your approach in building Frameable?
I mean, we all have to collaborate in order to get things done. I mean, it's possible that someone might come up with the the final version of an idea on their own, but they still need to collaborate in order to execute that idea. Most cases, but really, even if we back up to the idea and the design phase, the product or service design uh, part before the build really happens. Even the product or service design phase requires in software a lot, and in most things, in cars, in most manufacturing, whether it's digital products and services or physical, a lot of prototyping, a lot of testing, a lot of thoughtful reflective discussion among people who have slightly different, or in some cases, dramatically different expertise. And this group of people who have this different expertise, they are all coming together over and over again over some period of time to try to process the data from the experiments, come up with ideas about how to make things better, and then iterate. So that has not changed, I don't think, in a very long time. I mean, that is still kind of the only way that remarkable products and services can be designed. But um, when I think about the last, 10 years or so, I think about the period from, the early 2010s, 2012, 2013, all the way up until 2019, a relatively slow evolution of the digital toolkit for offices because most people really still were working physically together. Then we had the COVID era medical emergency from 2020 to 2022, and thankfully the medical emergency part of that is over for the most part. And now I think we're in a kind of a new phase, and so the question that we are all asking ourselves as we're running our businesses and trying to bring these new products and services to the market is, I mean, we all know that we're not going back to 2019. So the question is, what can we expect, or how can we use, and in some cases, how can we um, improve the tools that we're using and the processes that we're embracing to do better work when we're not physically together, because the labor force
Hmm.
is really making it very clear that there is a time for being physically together. There are certain types of work that benefit from being physically together, but it certainly does not have to be 5 days a week, uh, all day, every day, physically together. There are some kinds of work where you can do it just as well remotely. And also, people want the flexibility. So I think it's a talent management. It's a talent acquisition and retention issue that if a company wants to, you know, draw a hard line and say you're going to come back 5 days a week, all day, every day, I think I think, and some people disagree with this, but my view is that over time, it's going to be harder for them to attract and retain the best talent if that's their approach. So therefore, what we need to do as a workforce, as a workforce, not just my company, is ask ourselves what can we expect from the tools? What can we ask for from the tools that make it easier to decrease the difference in the quality and creativity of the work that is done on the days when people are physically together versus on the days when someone is home or everyone is home? And I think that's a worthy goal, and I think it's an achievable goal. And that we're not the only company that's focused on it. There are many companies that are focused on it, but that's really what I think we need to do to define the current era that we're in, the post-COVID era, where people want the flexibility. And the stats show that if you do remote work correctly, everybody can win. People are saving a lot of time on their commute on the days they're working from home. They're spending roughly half that time working more, and they're spending roughly half that time on their personal health and their family health. So everybody can win if you are willing to lean into it. In most cases, not every type of work, but in most cases, there's an opportunity there to adapt and to end up somewhere better.
Nice. So, with the still talking about remote work, with the rise of remote work, what notable changes have you observed in the way teams are collaborating and communicating, especially in the last 3 years or thereabouts?
Mhm. Well, for me, the most notable difference between people's approach to remote work now and their approach during the COVID era is there were a lot of tools that came about in the COVID era that looked a lot like video games. They were designed
Hmm.
by younger people who maybe had more of an impression, an imprint from their experience with video games. People were very focused on avatars and it just had a very gamey feel, a lot of these tools. And I think now what's happening is people have learned that, during the COVID era, maybe more demand for, there maybe was more demand for making work a bit more entertaining because we had so many other new unprecedented problems to solve. And, we were just doing what we could to improve engagement and focus. And I'm not going to say that it was wrong for then, but I think that now that the emergency has receded, when people, in a calm moment, think about what they want out of their remote work experience, I don't think they need their remote work experience to be uh, game driven or have the visual aesthetics of a game experience. Uh, they don't need virtual reality headsets on their desk at home. They don't need to have an avatar move through a funny looking uh, floor plan of different rooms. What they want is
Yeah.
just an evolution in the fundamental tools and in the way those tools work together to improve their standing at their desk or sitting at their desk experience. But they're still ready to work. They still know that they're there to work. Some work they can do alone, some work they need their colleagues. And when they need their colleagues, they don't want to play a game with their colleagues where work comes out the other side. What they want is something that's more serious, maybe more grown up, we could say, and more purpose built for helping them with their actual task at hand. So that, I think, is the biggest difference, is that people are not as interested in the game driven aesthetic, if they ever were. And now I think they're just ready to get down to business and say, okay, I just want to be more efficient and more creative when I'm not physically with my my colleagues? How can my tools help me do that? Well, in our case, in
Mm.
Frameable's case, we are going to where people are, in the sense that if your company is committed to using the Microsoft stack, then the very important starting point is, it has to integrate with Microsoft in order for me to consider using it. It could be the best innovation, the best improvement ever. But if it doesn't integrate, then I'm not going to be able to give it a try. So with Microsoft, with the Teams footprint being something like 300 million active monthly users, I think was the
Wow.
last stat that I saw. And with so many people using Outlook as well, and Teams and Outlook interoperability being what it is, um, that's the starting point. If you work for a company that is committed to Microsoft and doesn't use Zoom, and doesn't use WebEx, and doesn't use Google for the core pieces, then you need something that is going to improve your experience within the Microsoft world. So I think that's what people are ready for, is just a bit of a more serious approach. That doesn't mean there isn't a market for the game driven aesthetics. It just means that the largest companies in America, uh, for them, it's not as appealing. That's what we found.
All right. So, are there any specific tips or best practices you can recommend for running effective virtual meetings?
Well, the first is to, and I think these are all pretty well known. The first is to give some thought to who should be in the room and what you want to cover. It could be
Mm.
in the form of an agenda that's shared ahead of time. It could be an agenda that's not shared ahead of time, but it's just presented at the beginning of the meeting. I mean, I think that's more of a cultural difference, and I think both can work. If you have reading or material review that you want attendees to have done by the time they come, then you obviously need to provide them with the materials, the agenda, the materials, and the expectations. But even if you don't do that, I think just starting the meeting with an overview of why are we here, why are you here, the particular guest list for this meeting, why are you here, what are we going to try and do in the next half hour or the next 45 minutes,
Mm.
and just being very explicit about that, I would say, is the number one thing, that easy thing that really does not require any new tool or anything, no new tooling or software at all. Just take the time to think about it and make it clear.
For the past few months, thereabout, there has been this outcry by business leaders for staff to get back to the office. I know you mentioned that a few answers ago. So, and I feel this, the reason behind this is a lot of them are not used to this remote work environment because, like I was reading on a post yesterday, someone said, okay, when people are sitting in the office from 9 to 5, they feel they are working compared to when you can't see them or anything. So I feel that's a data or a probably target problem. So are there any particular data points or metrics that businesses should pay close attention to when assessing their workers to know that they're actually doing what they are meant to?
There is a lot of great research about remote work productivity. Um, I pay particular attention to Nick Bloom, who is an economist, a labor economist, who focuses on remote work and has for a very long time, 20 years or more. He's at Stanford. Uh, I think that there are a lot of stats, and there's a lot of research that companies should pay attention to. The
Hmm.
particular thing that you asked about, which is knowing whether or not their employees are doing their work, I think is tricky, because it's one thing to monitor people's outputs. In other words,
Hmm.
how much time are they spending at their desk, how many emails are they sending, how many text messages are they sending, how many phone calls are they on, things like that. I think are relatively easy to monitor, but somewhat controversial. People don't necessarily expect to be monitored in that way when they are remote. I think they have a little bit more of an understanding that that might be happening when they're in a physical office that's paid for by the company. But when they're working from home, I think the monitoring piece is, more controversial. But
Yeah.
monitoring the outputs, like the ones I just described, is different from focusing on the outcomes, meaning, is this team of people doing high quality work, and are they doing it at the velocity that we need them to do it? So it could be that, I mean, there's no way to correlate the number of emails that someone sends with the quality or creativity or quantity of their work. I mean, emails are not a good measure of those things. So the problem from the company's perspective is that the things that are easy to measure are not really the things they care about. They really shouldn't care about how many emails people send,
Mm.
or what time they're working, or if they take off an hour in the middle of the day, to go for a walk or something like that. What they should care about is the team of people that this person is a part of, are they doing high quality, highly creative work at velocity? And if the answer is yes, then let's figure out why they're able to do that. I don't I don't know that being physically together is really what is making the difference there. I think it has a lot to do with trust. Do the team members trust one another? Are they transparent with one another about both the successes and victories, but also challenges and defeats? And do they have just a problem solving approach and a culture of wanting to be helpful to one another? Those are the things that high performing teams have in common, not how many emails they send, uh, or the
Mm.
fact that they're physically in, the office every day. So the answer to the question is that there are lots of ways to monitor things that I don't think are the really the core goals. Um, and that a company really needs to focus on the collaborative culture that they have. And if they have a successful collaborative culture in the office, physically in the office, then they are naturally going to want people to come back to the office. But the question is the fact that these people are physically together really the critical reason why they are performing well? Or is it because of the trust and the transparency and the other things? So, um, I think that's an open question. The answer is going to be different for every company, depending on their
Yeah.
culture. But it's not quite as easy as just monitoring, the easy to monitor things, and then setting targets.
That's interesting. There's something you said I like, that monitoring the output is different from focusing on the outcomes.
Yes.
That's something to take note of. So, going back to Frameable, do you have any success stories or examples of organizations that have improved their remote work experience and productivity with your solutions?
Yes, we do. We're preparing some case studies along those lines now. So when they're done, I'll be happy to share them with you. It's interesting. It's such a the work, the collaborative culture of a company is such a, in a way, a kind of a private uh, part of their, of their assets. Maybe it's a part of their
Yeah.
identity, and it's not easy to find companies that are excited to allow us to tell their success stories.
Yeah.
So this is something we wrestle with. But the answer is, yes, there are many, and we're very proud of them. And mostly what they have to do with is companies recognizing that that the way the tools were the tools that they were relying on before, such as email, such as video calls, etc. Um, they provided connectivity, but they didn't necessarily provide the transparency or the trust that powers great collaboration. Uh, I could schedule a meeting with someone, but I could never really see them if I wasn't in a scheduled meeting with them, for example. So some of our apps aim at increasing opportunities for transparency and visibility for people, even when you're not collaborating with them. So if you want to make yourself visible, to people, even when you're not in a meeting with them, you can do that, and you can increase the chances that you're going to have an unscheduled interaction with someone. This is a very important part of uh, collaboration. Every collaboration, every meaningful collaboration or interaction cannot be scheduled. It's just impossible. I mean, there is just a different feel to a scheduled interaction as opposed to seeing someone in the hallway, or seeing someone in a different way. Uh, Very famously, when Steve Jobs designed the Apple headquarters, the donut, it's called the donut, out in California. He went out of his way, and he did this at Pixar as well. So there's a long history of recognizing that in order to create the connective tissue between the different team members, you really have to give them opportunities to collide with one another in an unscheduled way, pass each other on the way to the cafe, or walk to a meeting in a conference room that's a little bit further away. You really don't want people to be insular, to only interact with people in their department or things like that. So the problem with the tools, or I should say the opportunity with the tools, including the Microsoft suite, is that the tools were not really designed to be the entire solution, because they were used historically in the context of a physical space where these kinds of collisions could happen, physically, and the way humans are used to having them. So once people are physically apart, working from home, um, there's no other opportunity besides that which comes through the software. So this is really the biggest opportunity for the next generation of remote collaboration tools and improvements like what we do. And the success stories come back to your question. The success stories come from companies not really realizing how those things were interrelated, and then they would install some of our apps, and they would have a different optionally a different level of transparency, and it would just change how people interact with one another, how frequently they interact, and how much trust there is on the team, and that's what leads to the improvement.
Amazing. So, can you share any new features or integrations or feature plans for Frameable that users and potential customers can look forward to?
Well, again, it's hard to describe them in sufficient detail with no visuals, but I mean, I will do my best. So first, the multi-share, I think, again, easiest to understand, and that is available in the Microsoft App Store. We have this overview view of all of the existing functionality in Microsoft Teams, but we've brought it onto one page. This is something that's in the end stages of development before the initial release, and we'll be releasing that very soon. I think we're going to call it Overview. So you can look for that in the App Store as well. We're going to adapt a whiteboard product that we had built in the past, and put it in the App Store, so that it can be used inside Microsoft Teams. So there are a lot of whiteboard apps already available, but we see some opportunities for differentiation. So I think we're going to bring one more into the market and see if it strikes a note. And then the other opportunities are focused on channels in Microsoft Teams. Channels are, for some companies, a very important way that groups are structured, and they are not quite as easy to navigate as they could be. So we have some improvements coming out when it comes to how channels appear and how you interact with them, that are also going to be exciting for people who rely on channels. I would say those are probably the ones I can describe without visual aids here. But at frameable.com, we have everything right out in the open. So I encourage people to go and take a look.
Looking back at your journey, your career up till this point, building and Frameable, if you were to meet your younger self and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would that be?
Hmm. Well, I bet you've heard this answer before. If you ask it, um, if you ask it every episode. I mean, I think it's just learning how to be a good listener. Uh, when I say listener, I don't just mean listening to your colleagues. I also mean listening to your customers. Sometimes people really want something to sometimes people build a product or a service, they bring it to market, and they are just sure that this is the answer. And every time they talk to a user or a customer who finds a problem or an opportunity for improvement, um, the way they explain that is they say, "Oh, well, that person's not our customer," and that might be true. You know, that might be true that that particular person is not your customer, but um,
Yeah.
listening to the chorus, you know, looking for the signal in all of the responses. I think if you are a good listener, and you are willing to be honest, then the customers or the users can really teach you a lot about how to improve what you have. And you know, they say this about I'm not a fiction writer, but fiction writers say this about their work, that they don't always know how it's going to end when they start it. And that's kind of hard, I think, for those of us who are not fiction writers to understand, or maybe it's just people with my kind of brain. That's amazing to me that you could start writing a story about characters that you've made up and not really know where it's going to end. But I think we hear that a lot from writers, and I believe it. And I think that the same is true of product development. You know, you can really be obsessed with a problem, but be flexible about the solution. And you never know what the solution is going to look like, you know, by the end of your journey.
Mm.
But it's probably going to be different from what you thought it was going to be when you started. So listening is the key to making that progress. And I mean, I think I've become a pretty good listener, but you know, my advice would be for younger people to really focus on that skill at an early age, because that is what's going to, you know, bring them all of the insights that are going to make the difference. I think whether it comes to product design or you know, or just learning what you can from your colleagues and your bosses and your customers.
That's an interesting answer, listening. All right, so as we get to the end of this episode, for users who would like to learn more from you or connect with you or reach out or maybe use your product Frameable, how can they reach you?
Yeah, very easy to reach me. Frameable.com has all of our products, and you can also find us in the App Store. Um, you can reach me just by sending an email to support at Frameable, or just clicking through any of the, you know, contact us links on the website and just say for Adam, or attention Adam or something like that, and it will get to me, no problem. I also use
Yeah.
LinkedIn, so would love to hear from people who are interested in our products, or who have these problems. You know, who want something more out of the Microsoft Teams offering. Just send me a note on LinkedIn, and we'd love to connect and listen to you describe what you're looking for.
That's amazing. So thank you so much for coming on the Take Your Business show today to share with us on collaboration and remote work. I've learned a couple of things from this episode, and I'm sure our listeners have picked up one or two things too that they can apply, especially about presentation and meetings. And for our listeners, thank you for being with us on this episode of the Take Your Business podcast. Till next week, when we come back with another episode, don't forget to keep taking your business. Bye for now.
Thank you, Peter. Hi, this is Adam Riggs, the CEO of Frameable. We make upgrades for Microsoft Teams, and you're listening to the Tech Your Business podcast.